8 months. That's all it took. Not 8 years, not 8 decades. 8 months to go from having a $500,000 retirement plan, my whole life's work, to being flat broke. Not just broke, but broken. 8 months to build what I thought was my future, to open what I thought was my bar, with the woman I thought I was going to marry. You know, for 35 years I built things. Real things, out of steel. I understood hard work. I understood tangible assets. I thought I was smart. I thought I had a plan. But over there, none of that mattered. Over there, I was just another old fool buying a fantasy he desperately wanted to be real. And the worst part? The part that keeps me awake right here, with the snow falling outside this window? It's the final, gut-wrenching lesson. It didn't happen in a back alley or with a gun to my head. It happened on a sunny afternoon while I was out buying her a birthday present. A little gold necklace. I remember feeling so happy, thinking this was it, we'd finally made it. I came back to the bar, our bar, with the gift in my pocket and the key in my hand, and the locks had been changed. The name on the sign was painted over. She was gone. Her phone was disconnected. The money was gone. The dream was gone. Everything was gone. To understand how a man with my life experience ends up holding a useless key in a country he doesn't know, you have to understand the man I was just a year ago. You have to understand the loneliness that drove me there in the first place. Before all that, I wasn't a fool. Or at least I didn't think I was. My name is Gary. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and for 35 years I worked for the same heavy machinery company. I was a lead welder. My hands, they understood steel. They understood heat and pressure, and how to fuse two separate things into something that would last forever. I built things you could stand on, things that moved earth. I wasn't some guy playing with numbers on a screen. I believed in tangible assets, in the weight of a thing in your hand. For 40 of those years, I was married to Susan. We built a life the same way I built everything else. Slowly, carefully, with patience. We bought a little house, raised 2 kids, and put money away. After she passed, 3 years ago now, that house stopped being a home. It was just rooms. The silence was the loudest thing in it. My kids are good kids, but they're on the West Coast building their own lives. They'd call, but what was I going to say? That the days were 100 hours long? That retirement, the thing I'd worked my whole life for, felt like being put out to pasture? When I finally sold the house and cashed out my 401k, I was holding about $450,000. It felt like a mountain of money. It was everything Susan and I had ever built, turned into a number in a bank account. And it was my one shot, my one chance to not just fade away in the brutal Buffalo snow waiting for the phone to ring. The idea came on a Tuesday night in the dead of winter, the kind of night where the sky is the same color as the slush on the road, and the only sound is the wind trying to find a crack in the window frame. I was sitting in Susan's favorite chair, and I swear, I could feel the loneliness as a physical weight in the room. It had been 3 years. I'd told myself I was handling it. But that night I wasn't. I was just an old man in a big empty house with nothing but the television for company. I wasn't even looking for anything. Just clicking. And then this video pops up. The thumbnail was all blue sky and white sand. The title was something like "Retired at 55, Living Like a King in Thailand." I clicked it. There's this guy, looked about my age, maybe a little softer around the middle. He's got a beer in his hand, a huge grin on his face, and his arm is around this woman. A beautiful Thai woman who was smiling at him like he was the only man on earth. He's talking to the camera, telling everyone how he traded in his miserable life in Ohio for this. Said he lived on $2,000 a month and never had to worry about a thing. One video turned into 10. 10 turned into 100. Pattaya, Phuket, Chiang Mai. It was a flood of warmth and color and life pouring into my gray living room. These weren't kids, they were guys like me. Guys who'd worked their whole lives, done the right thing, and ended up alone. And they had found a way out. They weren't just surviving, they were living. My welder brain kicked in. The part of me that doesn't just dream, it measures and it cuts and it plans. This wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a project. For the next 6 months, I wasn't just waiting to die. I had a job again. Every morning I was at my desk with a cup of coffee and a mission. I built spreadsheets. On one side, I listed every single one of my expenses in Buffalo. The property taxes on the house, the heating bill that could choke a horse, the car insurance, the groceries. On the other side, I listed the numbers these guys in the videos were talking about. An apartment for $300 a month, a meal for $2, a beer for $1. I spent hours, days, weeks on expat forums. I read the good, the bad, the ugly. I wasn't naive. I read the stories about guys who got taken. But for every one of those, there were 10 guys who said it was the best decision they ever made. And my numbers backed them up. My $450,000. It wasn't just a pile of cash. I figured if I made a couple of simple, low-risk investments, I could pull in $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month from the interest alone. I'd never have to touch the principal. It was a perfect plan. It was logical. It was safe. It was the escape hatch I'd been praying for. I remember one night I had it all laid out, the numbers worked, the plan was solid. And I heard this little voice in my head, sounded a lot like Susan, and it said, "Gary, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is." I looked at my spreadsheet. I looked at the picture of the beach I had taped to my monitor, and I said out loud, to the empty room, "The numbers don't lie." I wasn't chasing a fantasy. I was executing a plan. The next morning I booked a one-way flight to Bangkok. I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I felt like I was finally building something for myself again. I packed my bags, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in complete control of my life. When I stepped out of the airport in Bangkok, the heat hit me like a physical thing. It wasn't like the humid summers back home. This was a thick, wet blanket of warmth, scented with exhaust fumes and spices I didn't have names for. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel the ache in my bones from the cold. I felt alive. Genuinely, physically alive. Like someone had turned the color back on. Pattaya was even more intense. A chaotic, beautiful mess of sounds and smells and people. My hotel was clean, comfortable, and cost less for a week than a single night in a decent place in the States. My spreadsheets hadn't lied. For the first month, I just was. I didn't have an agenda. I didn't have a schedule. For the first time in 40 years, I had nowhere to be and no one counting on me to be there. I walked everywhere. I ate street food for $1 that tasted better than any $20 meal I'd ever had back home. I'd sit at a beachfront bar in the late afternoon drinking a cold beer that cost me less than $1 and just watch the world go by. The sun on my face, the sound of the water, people laughing all around me. Nobody knew I was a widower from Buffalo. Nobody knew I had eaten frozen dinners alone for 3 years. People smiled at me, not the polite, empty smiles from back home, the kind that mean nothing. Real, genuine smiles. I felt respected. I felt visible again. And that's when I met Knock. She wasn't one of the girls on Walking Street, the main tourist drag. She worked at the bar in my hotel, a quieter, classier place. She was 38, elegant, with a kind of grace that made her stand out. She spoke good English, and when I sat at her bar, she didn't just ask me what I wanted to drink. She asked me where I was from. She asked me about my work. I told her I was a welder, that I built things out of steel. Her eyes lit up. She said, "You make strong things. That is a good man." For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw the man I used to be, not just the old guy I was becoming. It was a whirlwind. We started having dinner. She took me to little local places far from the tourist traps. We took weekend trips to quiet beaches. She'd put her hand on my arm when I talked and she'd listen. Really listen. I was spending money, sure. About $3,000 a month between the nice dinners, the little gifts, the trips. But what was that, really? In Buffalo, $3,000 barely covered my property tax and utilities. Here, it was buying me a life. It was buying me happiness. After a few weeks, she told me she loved me. She said I was different from the other foreigners, the ones who just came for a good time. She said I had a good heart. Then, about a month in, the first test came. She was quiet one night, distracted. I asked her what was wrong. She looked at me, her eyes full of tears, and told me her mother, who lived in a small village up north, was sick. She needed a surgery, nothing life-threatening, but necessary. The hospital wanted the money up front. It was 25,000 Thai baht, about 800 American dollars. I didn't even hesitate. That nagging little voice in my head, the one that sounded like Susan, whispered something about a story I'd read on a forum. But I shut it down. This was different. This was knock. I went to the ATM, pulled out the cash, and gave it to her. The relief on her face. It was like I had personally saved her mother's life. She held my hand and said, "You are my hero, Gary. You take care of my family." I wasn't just another tourist anymore. I was a provider. I was part of a family again. And that feeling was worth a lot more than $800. That $800 wasn't a cost. It was an investment. I was investing in her happiness, which had become my happiness. The feeling of being needed, of being a man who could solve problems, it was something I hadn't felt since Susan got sick. For a couple of weeks after that, things were perfect. Better than perfect. She was bright. She was laughing. She'd look at me across a dinner table with this expression, like I was a hero. And I started to believe it. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony of my hotel room, looking out over the city lights. She put her head on my shoulder. She said, "Gary, you are a strong man, a builder. You spend your whole life making things that last." She picked up my hand, traced the calluses that were finally starting to soften. "Why do you waste your money on this hotel, paying rent to someone else? It is not smart. We should build something together, for our future." The word build hit a switch in my brain that had been turned off for 3 years. All my life, I built things. It was the one thing I knew how to do. "What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart was already pounding. "A bar," she said, her eyes shining. "Not on Walking Street, not for the bad men. A nice bar, a place for friends. I know a place, on a side street, a soi. Good people walk there. It is for sale. We could make it beautiful. We could make it ours." It wasn't a vague dream. She had a plan. She had a specific place in mind. It electrified me. The spreadsheets, the research, that was all just theory. This was real. This was a project. Something to put my hands on. Something to build from the ground up. It felt like my life was starting over, for real this time. The next day she took me to see it. It was a dusty, forgotten little place on Soi Buakau, a busy side street. Rundown, but I could see the potential. My welder brain took over. I saw where the bar would go, where the tables would sit, how the light would hit in the afternoon. "There is one problem," Nok said, her hand tight in mine. "In Thailand, a foreigner cannot own a business. It must be in a Thai person's name, for protection." My stomach did a little flip. The voice, Susan's voice, cleared its throat in the back of my head. "Gary, be careful." But Nok was already looking at me, her eyes wide and sincere. "But it is our bar, honey, you and me. It will be in my name, but it is for us, forever." Before I could even process it, she had the solution. "My cousin," she said. "He is a lawyer. He can do all the papers. He will explain everything. It is standard. It is how everyone does it." The cousin was a man in a cheap suit who smiled too much. We met in a stuffy office. He spread papers out on a desk and used a lot of official-sounding words. He confirmed everything Nok had said. It was the law. The business had to be in her name. He would handle the licenses, the lease, everything. To me, a guy who understood steel and pressure, this world of papers and foreign laws was a maze. I wanted to trust. I needed to trust. The alternative, that this was all just a story, was too bleak to consider. So, I did what the man said. I went to the bank and made the transfer. $70,000. A wire transfer from my world into hers. It was for the complete renovation, all the licenses, and a full year of rent paid up front. As I watched the teller process it, I didn't feel fear. I felt a surge of pride. I was building again. For the next 2 months, I was alive. I was on site every single day from sunup to sundown. I wasn't welding, but I was directing the workers, pointing, measuring, making decisions. I felt that old, familiar satisfaction of watching something take shape because of my will. We called it Gary's Place. My name, right there on the sign. When we finally opened, it was one of the proudest days of my life. The place was beautiful. Warm wood, good lighting, a long, polished bar that I had personally helped sand and finish. Knock was there, beaming, her arm linked through mine, telling every person who walked in that her husband had built this place. I stood behind that bar on opening night and shook hands and bought rounds and laughed louder than I had laughed in years. For a few weeks it was a dream. The place was busy. Expats and locals both seemed to love it. I felt like the king of my own little castle. I had done it. I had actually done it. And then, the family started to arrive. First, it was her brother. A sullen guy who barely spoke a word of English and seemed to have a deep personal hatred for paying customers. Knock made him the bartender. He needs a job, honey. We must help family. His main job seemed to be giving away free drinks to his friends, who suddenly occupied the end of the bar every single night. Then, her sister showed up. She was put in charge of the cash register, and like clockwork, every single night, the drawer would come up short. 1,000 baht here, 2,000 there. $30, $60. Annoying, but not a catastrophe. Not yet. After a month of this, I sat down alone one night with our books spread across the kitchen table. The numbers weren't just wrong. They were impossible. We were busy every night, the bar was full, but we were somehow bleeding money. I stared at those receipts for an hour before I could even bring myself to say it out loud. I approached Knock the next morning, gently, the way you'd approach a live wire. I laid out the receipts in 2 neat columns. I showed her the math. "Honey," I said, keeping my voice as calm and level as I could, "this doesn't add up. Your sister at the register, the money is just—" I didn't get to finish. Her face, which had been so full of love every single morning for 8 months, crumpled instantly into a mask of pure betrayal. Tears streamed down her cheeks in seconds. Not slow, building tears, but a sudden flood, like she'd had them ready. "You don't trust me," she wailed, her voice loud enough for the staff to hear through the kitchen wall. "You think my family, is stealing from you. After everything I do for you, I gave you this life." The scene was so sudden, so violent in its emotion, it knocked me back on my heels. I was terrified, not of her, but of losing this, losing her, losing the dream of Gary's Place. The little voice in my head was screaming, "She's playing you, you old fool." But the sight of her crying, the thought of the silence and the snow waiting for me back in Buffalo, it was a choice I couldn't make. I backed down. I apologized. I held her and told her of course I trusted her. Of course I did. That was the moment I stopped being an owner. I became the ATM. To cover the shortfalls, I started pumping my own money in. First, it was $5,000 to restock the inventory after a suspiciously bad week. Then another $5 the following month to cover unexpected expenses that were never itemized in any way I could verify. Then it stopped being a response to a crisis and became just the way things worked. A standing $10,000 transfer every single month just to keep the lights on. I'd wire the money and she'd squeeze my hand and say we were almost through the rough patch, that the bar was finding its footing. The business was like a car with a cracked engine block. I just kept pouring oil in, month after month, telling myself it just needed a little more time to get running right. I was no longer building. I was just patching leaks in a hull that had been sunk from the beginning. 7 months after we opened, I was in for over $150,000. The bar was busy, the music was loud, but on paper we were drowning. And that's when the final play came. I got a call from Knock. She was hysterical. "Gary, you must come home. Now. It is a disaster." I found her in our apartment pacing, her face pale with genuine-looking fear. "It is the police," she sobbed. "The license? There is a problem. They say we did not pay the right people. A very powerful man is angry. They are going to shut us down." She grabbed my arms with both hands, her nails digging in hard enough to leave marks. "They say, because you are a foreigner, they might deport you." Deportation. The word hit me like a physical blow. I had heard stories on the expat forums, guys who had gotten on the wrong side of a local official and found themselves on a plane home with nothing but the clothes on their back. To be sent home in shame, with nothing, having lost everything, and having nothing to show for it. It was my worst nightmare given a single word. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice shaking in a way I hadn't heard from myself since Susan's hospital room. "He wants money," she whispered, looking around as if the walls were listening. "A lot of money, to make the problem go away forever." She looked me right in the eye, tears silently rolling down her face. $50,000, Gary. 50,000. The number felt like a punch straight to the gut. My vision actually blurred for a second. The voice of reason, the ghost of my wife, was shouting in my ear now, loud and clear. "This is it. This is the big one. Walk away, Gary. Just walk away." But I looked at Knock's terrified face. I thought of the 7 months of work. I thought of the $150,000 I had already sunk into this dream. To walk away now meant admitting it was all a lie. Admitting I was a fool. The sunk cost fallacy had me in a headlock. "It is the last time, I promise," she cried, sensing my hesitation. "We pay this, and all our problems are gone forever. We will be safe, you and me." I was panicked. I was exhausted. And more than anything, I wanted to believe her. I made the transfer. The last big chunk from my brokerage account in the States. The final bet. For a week, it was like the beginning all over again. The problems vanished. Knock was more affectionate than she'd ever been. She was planning our future, talking about a trip to the islands. It was her 39th birthday coming up. I felt a surge of relief, of hope. I thought, we did it. We weathered the storm. I wanted to do something special. That afternoon, I went to a nice jewelry store in one of the big air-conditioned malls. I spent 2 hours looking for the right gift, a little gold necklace with a single pearl I knew she'd wanted. I remember the feeling, standing at the counter paying for it. I felt happy. I felt like a man who had secured his future, who was taking care of his woman. I put the little box in my pocket and walked back to the bar, picturing the look on her face. I turned the corner onto our SOI. From a distance, something looked wrong. The sign. It was a different color. As I got closer, my blood ran cold. The name Gary's Place was gone, painted over with a new name in looping Thai script. I ran the last few feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I jammed my key into the lock. It wouldn't go in. The locks were new. I stepped back and fumbled for my phone. I dialed her number, a recorded message, first in Thai, then in a cold, computerized English voice. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." It was like the whole world went silent. The street noise, the music, the heat. It all just faded away. There was only that voice echoing in my head, no longer in service. My fingers, moving on their own, opened my banking app. The Thai account I'd been using to pay for everything. Empty. 0 baht. I logged into my brokerage account back in the States. The one I'd sworn I would never touch. The one I had just pulled $50,000 out of. The balance flashed on the screen. $4,012. I looked up from the phone. The little jewelry box was still in my other hand, a hard square lump against my palm. A birthday gift for a woman who didn't exist. Standing in front of a bar that wasn't mine. Holding a key to nothing. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the end, and I had paid for every single second of it. So here I am, back in Buffalo. I had $4,000 left to my name when all was said and done. Enough for a one-way ticket home and the deposit on this little apartment. The same gray sky out the window. The same snow. It's funny. A year ago, this was the exact scene I was running from. The silence, the cold, the nothing. Now, it's just quiet. Different kind of quiet. I make my coffee in the morning, I read the paper, and I take a long walk even when it's cold, because I've learned that the cold isn't the worst thing in the world. Loneliness is the worst thing in the world. And at night, the only person I have to answer to is myself. There's a strange kind of peace in that. A very expensive peace, but a real one. The most honest thing in my life right now is this window and this snow. And I can live with that. Look, I'm not making this video for pity. I got what I paid for. I'm making it for the guy I was a year ago, sitting alone in his house with the TV on, watching YouTube videos and dreaming of an escape. If that's you, if you're sitting there right now feeling that same ache, please, listen to me. The first thing you have to understand is this. Loneliness is a terrible investment advisor. It's a hunger. And when you're hungry, you'll eat anything that's put in front of you. You won't stop to ask if it's good for you. You won't question the price. You'll just pay. I didn't give my money to a con artist. I gave it to the idea that I wouldn't have to be alone anymore. Every time I transferred money for a family emergency, or to cover a shortfall at the bar, I wasn't buying inventory or paying off some corrupt official. I was buying another day of not being invisible. I was paying for a hand to hold. The second thing is, your dream of a new life can be a well-planned business model for someone else. I thought I was building a future. I was the future she was building. All those guys in the videos smiling on the beach, they're selling a fantasy. And on the other side of that screen, there are people who have gotten very, very good at cashing in on it. They know exactly what you want to hear. They know you want to be a provider, a hero, a man with a plan. They will sell you that version of yourself, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to sell. So before you book that flight, before you transfer a single dollar for a sure thing or a family problem or a business opportunity that sounds just a little too good to be true, you need to stop and ask yourself one honest question. Dig deep and be honest. Are you looking for a partner or are you just paying to not be lonely? Because in Pattaya, the price for that is everything you have. Don't learn that lesson the way I did.